50,000 times that this is what it looked at here. So rather than try to read the one so Dad, I apologize. Okay, so now that we're all awake, you just heard a medley, a portion of a medley of fiddle tunes that Papa and I often play together. He'd lead from one tune to the other, and I do my best to follow. He liked to call this game of ours News'em, and he often did. The time-honored advice for giving a public talk is to tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. So what is it I want to tell you then? I want to tell you about the power of stories, how they shape the values and identity of ourselves, families, communities, and society at large. I want to tell you the story about one family, my family, the Riehl Thompsons, who helped shape the values and identity of this region starting in the 1860s, shortly after Elsah was founded in 1853. So let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, isn't that how all the stories begin? Once upon a time in the early 1860s, legend has it that a steamboat captain trekking along the Mississippi River spotted property on top of the bluff and said to himself, I think that's where I'm going to make my home. And so he did. By 1863, he built a family home there and called his place Evergreen Heights. This man, my great-grandfather, was E.A. Riehl. Evergreen Heights, just downriver from here, 6 miles downriver, became home for 6 generations of Riehls and Thompsons, including me. I now live in the big brown house Grandpa Riehl first built 159 years ago. Well, wait, that's not what happened. Here's what really happened. In the early 1860s, while planting an orchard in Jersey County, Grandpa Riehl became aware that an adjoining farm was for sale that seemed ideal for a life working with plants and trees. In August 1863, at 26, he purchased 117 acres of hills and brush on the bluffs above the Mississippi River in Elsah Township, Jersey County, Illinois, 6 miles downriver from where we are gathered this evening. On August 12, the deed of purchase of this land from John Locke was recorded. In January 1864, he increased his holdings, recorded this event in his day book, which he kept for 33 years. These day books now reside in the University of Illinois archives. Went to town, bought a piece of land from Mr. Billings for $400. This property adjoined his original land on the east and was bounded on the west by Piassal Creek. Thus began the story of how the son of an immigrant couple from Germany expanded his father's St. Louis plant nursery into a renowned Jersey County horticultural business. In addition to the day book entries, which provide invaluable details of daily life, Grandpa Riehl also kept accurate account books recording all of his income and expenses. He kept these records during his entire lifetime, making the final entry 3 days before his death in 1925. These day books and accounts offer a rare, comprehensive description of the life and times of an individual, a family, an area, and an era. From the first day book entry that tells of buying his land until the move was made only 4 months later to the new home on November 27, 1863, each day recorded some phase of the building process and then the move itself. Moved things down to the new house early in the morning and had our first meal in it. Went to town for groceries. Had a heavy rain in the PM. Turned cold at night. As could be expected, the move was not the end of labors connected with the house and the land. There's no cause for wonder that so many day book entries speak of grubbing land to clear space for crops. A considerable part of Jersey County was then wilderness in the process of being settled. Now that he had a home, he was ready for a bride. In 1866, within 3 years of that first meal in the new house, he married Matilda Resch in a triple wedding with her brothers. In his usual cursory fashion, his daybook announces his marriage thusly. Men cut great steaks, went to St. Louis on boat in morning, got married to Matilda Henrietta Resch, and came home in the evening. Thus began their marriage of 44 years, yielding 9 children, 3 boys and 6 girls. 2 sons went on to run their own horticultural businesses, even expanding internationally. 1 daughter continued the horticultural work after her father's death. The Riehl children wrote poetry and played musical instruments. The grandmother became a missionary in Korea, my grandmother, and my great uncle Frank became a world champion marksman. Indians were part of the life of this region in the 1860s. There's a story about my great grandmother Matilda. She was upstairs, all alone in the house, rocking her first baby to sleep, when she heard a small sound as the door opened and an Indian stood in the doorway. He was armed, and she was sitting without any means of defense. She tried her best not to show that she was scared half out of her wits, as the aunties used to express the state of mind. She kept rocking the baby, waiting for the Indian to make the deciding move. He simply stood there, not threatening or retreating. She asked what he wanted. Somehow, he understood what she meant, for he made signs like he was eating. She understood then that he was traveling down the river and was hungry. She went down to the kitchen, stirred up the fire in the old cook stove, and fed him. He ate with a hearty appetite. Likely he hadn't had a real meal for some time. He expressed his thanks with dignity and departed as silently as he had arrived to continue his journey on the Father of Waters. Grandpa Riehl and his brood took up the difficult task of supporting a family on the hilly lands. By dint of hard work, common sense, and lean living, familiar as the traditional German values, they did it. He continually worked to expand and upgrade his enterprise. Day after day, he records that hired help have been set to grubbing to make more room for planting. Plants and trees were advertised in a free catalog. At one time or another, he raised 5 types of grain as farm crops, 18 types of vegetables, 14 types of fruit, 5 types of nuts, and 3 varieties of flowers. In addition, the girls made pickles, kraut, apple butter, jellies, and wines. They made apple cider in large quantities, storing it in a barrel room in the barn. Some of the apple cider was then made into vinegar. He changed his main crop 11 times. He was always the first in the neighborhood to start growing a new crop, but when one began to be planted to excess, began growing something new. For instance, he was the first to grow asparagus in the entire area, but plowed it under when the other farmers put their fields into asparagus. But Mr. Riehl, protested the neighbors, scratching their heads. Why did you plow up your asparagus? That's a good crop. To which Grandpa replied, well, it was a good crop. Over the course of decades, he became one of the foremost horticulturalists of his generation, specializing in grafting new varieties of nuts. He became renowned for his chestnut trees. The grafting of these trees is difficult, but he pioneered a new way of grafting that increased the likelihood that the graft would take. He was particularly well known for his variety testing and crossbreeding techniques. Grandpa Riehl was awarded a gold medal certificate for his fruit in the 1904 World's Fair. While we're at it, you may be wondering, what is horticulture? A handy dictionary says that horticulture focuses on plant propagation and cultivation with the aim of improving plant growth, yields, quality, nutritional value, and resistance to insects, diseases, and environmental stresses. His daughter, my great aunt Amelia, whom I'll call Mim, carried on his work after his death. He was also a pillar of the community, so much so that a lane was named after him. Riehl Lane still turns off what my father called the hard road, now Illinois 3 North, which runs between Alton and Jerseyville. Two other landmarks were an important part of the community, Riehl Station and Riehl Landing. Riehl Station was a stop on the Bluff Line Railroad, and Riehl Landing served as a way station for the boat traffic on the Mississippi, which passed by our bottomland. By the way, if you go to the public launching ramp, there's a 3-sided sign there, pretty close to the launching ramp. And on one side, it's a project, it's part of a project for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And it's a paddling trail that goes from the source to the mouth of the Mississippi. And at each put-in point that they've designated, there are these signs. And on one side, it says, well, here's how not to kill yourself when you're paddling. The other side says, well, now that you're here, you might like to do this. The other side says, and this is what happened here. And so that side tells about how that was our cornfield. And it tells about the Riehls, and it has some very nice pictures, again, from the Riehl archives. So that would be a fun field trip to go down. Riehl Station was a stop on the Bluff Line Railroad, and Riehl Landing served as a way station for the boat traffic on the Mississippi, which passed by our bottomland. For the Riehls, these stops provided a way to drop off supplies and pick up the produce being shipped to Chicago and back east. Despite all this, there were times of financial hardship to the point that the family had to fight to keep the place. Establishing a small business of summer boarders, his best crop, Grandpa liked to say, helped stabilize the sometimes uneven farm income and enabled them to pay off the mortgage. But besides his work, what kind of man was he, Riehl? He was a hard man to know, with no time for foolishness or extra words. His family was important to him. He was hardworking, innovative, such as inventing tools for a specific job, a good neighbor, and community-minded. He doctored the sick when poor people could not afford a doctor. He built coffins in his shops for neighbors who could not afford store-bought ones for their dead. His assistance was always done quietly and without fanfare. He always refused any help for himself, even in the direst straits. Once waves capsized a skiff from which he was loading mail onto a steamboat. He fell into the river, but nonchalantly waved off those offering assistance with the instructions to go on, you take care of your business and I'll take care of mine. Grandpa Riehl was not an advocate of organized religion. This attitude did not, however, stop him from contributing money and helping to build the Melville Congregational Church. One day, while working on the church, a fellow worker asked, Mr. Riehl, I know that you're not a church-going man. Why are you helping build this church? He replied, because I believe that every community needs a church. I find my communications with God as I work with his trees and plants. Other people need a church, and they should have a place to worship, get married, and hold their funerals. My great-grandparents, 2 aunts, 1 great-uncle, and my father are buried in the Melville Cemetery. The church he helped build was long ago taken down, but the dead still find it a convivial place to rest. Let me take you now to the summer of 1916, when my father's life joined with that of Evergreen Heights, his beloved home place. A 9-month-old infant lay on a blanket underneath a maple tree, bathed by a breeze from the Mississippi River below the bluffs. He had double pneumonia and wasn't expected to live. His family in Rushville, 100 miles north, struggled financially. His mother, Anna, one of the Riehl sisters, was doing poorly with 3 young children to care for. These days, medicine would have some answers, But then the most sensible advice the family doctor could give was send the boy down to your sisters and let him die in peace. The good news, I didn't die, my father often said in his 90s, because I had 3 aunts and a grandfather who didn't think I needed to die. To keep the farm going, each sister had a main job. His Aunt Amelia, Mim, also recovering from an illness, took care of him while Emma and Judy took over the kitchen and chores. Back to that blanket. Aunt Mim lay beside him and softly sang the words to Rainbow, the first song my father remembered hearing. He and Aunt Mim would learn to walk together, and she would become an important part of his musical training. At that moment, on that blanket, music filled the air and he breathed it in. Music proved to be a powerful medicine and then became his lifeline through almost 100 years of singing, playing, and serving. Let's see. Evergreen Heights truly was my father's home place. He raised his 3 children here with his wife Ruth, nursed her before her death, and died in his own bed at 99. He left for only one extended period during his army service in the Second World War. The land, the home place, has been the center of our family life throughout 6 generations. We are fortunate that the legacy of our ancestors lives on through the current Evergreen Heights Land Trust. 3 generations of family poets expressed their love of place infused with history, including my grandmother and great uncle. Tonight, though, I'll focus on only 2 generations as I share a poem of my father's and one of mine. Pop's poem, Our Heritage, speaks eloquently of that deep love. Our Heritage by Erwin A. Thompson. Persimmon, sassafras, and ash reclaim the land that once was theirs. Sub-marginal, the experts say. Once hillside plows were used to turn fertile ground. It nurtured and produced the crops, sustained with money crops and food the pioneers. They didn't have a guarantee of annual wage. Their maps, drawn out with pointed sticks in sand or smoothed out dirt. The farmers now, a different breed, no time to milk a cow. The streets of older towns, the Indian trails and wagon roads, grown up with old-time mansions on their winding path. Us younger fellers ask, what makes this street so crooked? Well, you see, Abe Prentice's barn was here. Couldn't put it straight through a man's barn. The wharves where riverboats tied up are gone. The river, still a master highway, carries on. No more the steamboat fired with coal or wood, the safety valve tied down. The diesel tug chugs on. They move the coal, the wheat, the oil, the lifeblood of our nation. My poem, Up Under the Pine Roads, tells about a special tree that comforted me as a girl. It comes from my poetry book, Sightlines, A Poet's Diary, which is a memoir told in 90 story poems. And tonight there is, as a gift for you, the audiobook that was produced out of that. So it has the 90 poems interspersed with music that we played in my dad's parlor. So I hope that you'll enjoy taking one of it. As long as you have a gizmo that will play a CD, you're good. There's 4 CDs. When I was a grown woman, Pop told me that that was his comfort tree as well. Up under the pine rows. When I was little and ran away from home, I ran under the pine rows under the ridge, those evergreen heights of ours. That's the tree I sang on as a boy, Pop says, on our stroll that has become an inspection walk. The branch is a beauty, a low curving upward horse of a branch. Great-grandpa E.A. Riehl planted these pines. Grandma Annie named her poems after them, On the Heights. God's heights were the heights she came to know here, seated underneath these evergreens on the ridge overlooking the Mississippi. She carried them to the Korean mission field and back. My sister Julia carried them to Europe, to Russia, to Africa, to Ellsworth Avenue in Pittsburgh and back. I carried them to Ghana, to Botswana, to Europe, to Bhutan, to South America, to New Mexico, to Northern California and back. My brother Gary carries them 60 miles north to his lake above Jacksonville and back and back and back. And so when I was little and ran away from home with some food stuffed in my pockets, quite naturally, I ran under the pine rows up on the ridge, those evergreen heights of ours. Each time I would swore it would be forever, but my forevers never lasted for more than an hour. I flung myself under that pony branch, prayed it would rear its way over me as it stampeded towards me, flung myself down for my cry, then faced upward towards the sky. These pines are our mothers and aunts and sisters. They are the resting place for ashes at the end. As Grandpa Riehl aged and his children left home, began to think about what would happen to Evergreen Heights after his death. Grandpa thought that since all the boys had left home, that the girls probably wouldn't be able to keep the place and run it after his death. He was giving serious thought to selling. He had an offer of $30,000 for the property, a lot of money at the time. The 3 aunties who still lived on the place, Mim, Judy, and Em, watched the city slicker come out and talk to him. They were afraid that the good offer would tempt him to sell. That night, Aunt Mim got up the courage to write her father a letter to say how they loved the place and wanted to stay here even after he died. He wrote her a letter back. The result of this exchange was the understanding that the girls would continue living here after he was gone. Naturally, Grandpa Riehl didn't want his work to disappear after his death. He was still busy grafting nut trees and learning more about this process that he helped pioneer. He had developed a formula for grafting wax that was later adopted almost universally by the Northern Nut Growers Association. Besides this, they were still making money raising peonies for Decoration Day and picking up chestnuts from their 20 acres of chestnut trees. My great Aunt Mim became the one to carry on this work. My father always said that Aunt Mim was a woman before her time, and she was. Grandpa Riehl set about teaching Aunt Mim how to graft nut trees. While we're on the subject, you may be wondering what grafting is and how do you do it? Grafting is simply inserting a portion of one plant, usually a shoot called the scion, into another, the host, so that they grow together to make a single plant. The grafting wax that Grandpa Riehl developed sealed the wood graft, which makes it more likely to take. After her father's death, Aunt Mim worked alone. Years later, she told my father that she had a heart attack while she was top rafting 40 feet up a hickory tree. She felt the attack coming on and tied herself in with a rope that she used to pull up her equipment. She survived the attack, untied herself, climbed down, and walked home. My father's boyhood at Evergreen Heights translated into a manhood that reflected the hard work, ingenuity, generosity, and a creative life of music and poetry that he'd been surrounded by growing up in the Riehl household. He played fiddle and other string instruments, called square dances, wrote 40 books, carved little critters, and could do anything, fix anything, make anything. And since there's some people in the audience who know my brother Gary, I can say that he passed it on to my brother, as those of you who know Gary can attest. Pop started calling square dances during the Great Depression. Square dancing in those days was more than just entertainment. These dances brought the community together to celebrate and strengthen ties, built by helping neighbors resolve differences and court that girl a boy had his eye on. The calls were more than dry directions. They were filled with fun and poetry. Farley Music Hall, where we gather tonight, was part of this tradition. On February 18th, 1938, 84 years ago, my father started the Elsah dances held every 2 weeks for the whole year. He was 23. Pop tells a story like this. I rented the Elsah Town Hall and managed to get the music together for these dances. Everyone had a wonderful time, for it had been a long winter without much social gathering. The village board let me have the hall for 50 cents, what they paid the janitor. For the first square dance of the evening, we asked the men dancing to donate a dime, which paid for the hall, coffee and sugar, coal oil for the stove that heated the coffee, plus a string fund. Musicians playing that long and hard break a lot of strings. In my fiddle case, I had a string for every instrument. If a musician broke a string, they got a new one. That was the only pay any musician ever got, except for the thrill of furnishing music for a group of dancers and their neighbors. One night, someone came over to complain about the noise disturbing the peace. Luckily, Judge Barnes, the local justice of the peace and member of the village board, was dancing that night. He said, well, we could put him in jail, but in the morning I'd hear the case and send him home. The complaint was dropped. I'd like to think that they even stayed to dance, but this story doesn't say. Let's imagine what it would have been like to be part of one of these Elsah square dances in 1938. Remember that money, vehicles, and gas were in short supply during the Great Depression. Pop says both going and coming home was standard practice to furnish transportation to all who asked, up to the capacity of a Model A Ford. Sometimes that capacity was stretched far beyond the 5 passengers that the manufacturer specified. Children and instruments were crammed into the car along with the adults. During bad weather, country roads were likely to be a place where a car got stuck, and it took a group effort to rescue the vehicle. My father contended that the worse the weather, the more fun people had. Neither snow nor 17-degree weather could keep even sensible folks at home. The etiquette of country dances mirrored the customs of the time and the community. The first and last dances were saved for your partner. Wallflowers didn't languish at the sidelines for long. Quadrilles, waltzes, rye waltzes, two-steps, ladies' choice, and broom waltzes were all part of the evening. Children, older folks, visitors were brought into the flow of the evening with grace and humor. A square is a team of 4 couples and 8 people. It's all for one and one for all. Going in the wrong direction, somebody will reach out an arm and turn you around. Lady around a lady and a gent, also lady around a gent and the gent don't go. grab your toe and on you go. Chicken in a red pan picking out dough. The view from the musician's platform gave a perspective to see all the interactions in the hall. Who was courting? Who was feuding? A good square dance caller could arrange things to help romance along or smooth out differences. There might be as many as 12 players on the platform, moving in an easy exchange of knowledge, figuring out which tunes they play and which key, and covering for one another so they each could dance as well as play. Playing for square dance takes stamina to stay on the beat and keep on the beat all night long. Often though, even when the dance ended at midnight, musicians would migrate to B. Lewis's house to play a little longer. Stay all night, stay a little longer, dance all night, dance a little longer, throw up a cup, put it in the corner, go, no, I don't stay a little longer. You ought to see my blue-eyed Sally, she lives way down in Shinbone Alley. Number on the gate, number on the door. Next house over is the grocery store. Mule and the grasshopper eating ice cream. The mule got drunk and they laid him on the beam. So what you can kind of guess is there is an endless supply of these novelty verses, right? So the point is that there's no way you could not stay a little longer. And you just keep making up more so that people don't leave music. So those were only two, because I know that you probably have cookies to bake when you get home or something. Square dancing was part of our lives growing up, and I talked to some folks beforehand who actually have been to some of our square dances. So that was really special. When I was a teenager, we cleared the furniture out of the dining room for the winter and threw a square dance party as often as every 2 weeks. Pop knew how kids were, especially how shy boys could be. To select partners, the girls lined up on the side of the room and the boys lined up on the other. Then we started backing up. Whoever you bumped into was your partner. Of course, you might choose your position in line or look over your shoulder to influence the outcome. He also devised a game by putting a 2x4 board on the floor held by 2 strong sets of hands at each end. The boys started from one end and the girls started from the other. In the middle of the board, the couple had to pass each other with the maneuver that my father demonstrated. If it didn't work, why, the board fell over to much laughter. In my father's version of old-time square dancing, there were many calls that were like games. Chase the rabbit, chase the squirrel, chase that pretty girl around the world. He showed us how a boy could stiffen his arm to pick up the girl when they came back home in the figure. The girl had to cooperate, of course. He also showed us how 2 couples in the middle of the room could brace themselves and whirl the girls with their legs out flying like gymnasts. Ladies bow and bow under, hug them up tight and swing them like thunder. My parents both weathered the Great Depression and World War II and absorbed those lessons of courage, strength, and survival. If waste was the cardinal sin in our family, then service was the cardinal virtue. My mother was a strategic visionary, and her efforts made key differences in our family's destiny and the well-being of children in the community. Her story certainly deserves study and telling, but that, alas, will have to wait for another time. My father lived 9 more years after my mother died, May 1st, 2006, 16 years ago. I moved back to the Midwest in 2007 to be part of the care team that allowed my father to stay on his beloved home place. During our time together, he continued to have music sessions on Sunday afternoon in our parlor and played for nursing homes with a group that included his 2 great-granddaughters, whom some of you know. At times, he became morose, feeling that the music he'd worked so hard to pass down would pass away with him. A line from one of his poems expresses it best. I cry not for my death, but for the music that will die with me. But he hadn't reckoned on the internet. Often when he mentioned a tune followed by the lament, that tune's gonna die, I dial it up on my phone and put the music to his ear, watching his slow smile stretch across his rugged and still handsome face. He got so used to this routine that he'd say, Janet, look that one up on your jukebox. Not only would his music not die with him, but his music accompanied him to his last breath. One night he told me, Janet, I feel tired. I said, well, it's early, but why don't you lie down? Next time I checked on him, it was clear that he'd started traveling toward his death. Family and friends stopped by over the next 2 days to pay their respects. In keeping with my father's love of hospitality, I served refreshments and hugged people when they emerged from his bedroom with tears in their eyes after saying their last goodbyes. Pop's passion for documenting his music on cassettes stood him in good stead during his last passage. We kept music playing night and day. It helped keep our spirits up, and I'd learned that hearing is the last sense to go. When my great niece arrived from the East Coast, late at night, we played for him beside his bed. Pop had always been the genius at starting us off. Without him to guide us, we faltered at first. Then we discovered that what one didn't know, the other did, and we felt comfort that all he'd shared with us hadn't been lost. That my father wrote both the music and the words for. It's among several. It's among several that he wrote, and also you'll hear snippets of that on the audio. Okay. Stories are sacred. They weave a thread through our lives, which can make us stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I'll close with a poem of my father's. In his poem, Water Under the Bridge, Pop reflects on the sometimes bittersweet of inevitable passing of time. He says, this poem was inspired by looking down at the water as we walked across the railroad bridge over Piasaw Creek at Lock Haven in my school days. Water Under the Bridge by Erwin A. Thompson. When we were young and went to school, we walked 2 miles each way. We sometimes dallied going home at the closing of our day. Stood on the bridge and looking down, we watched the water ever flowing. Far beneath and murky brown, we wondered where it might be going. More than half a century ago, the world seemed bright and fair. Little could we children know where we might go from there. Oh, a lot of water has flowed since then, and changes tore our world apart. The school's been closed, the bridge is gone, the past still lingers in my heart. But there can be no turning backward, no use to say what might have been. Like the water ever flowing, life goes onward to the end. Thank you. Thank you so much. And so I'd like to have some Q&A if you have some Q. Yes.
The last poem that you just read, was that published?
Yes.
I've heard it before.
Yes. I said that my father had written 40 books, and probably maybe at least 16, maybe more, were published. And one of these, and a lot of these are in the Hainer Library System. Also, while we're talking about Hainer, I want to let you know that at the Genealogy History Library on State Street, there is a Riehl Thompson archive there. We have archives up the gazoo all over the place. So this book, it's wonderful. It's called Worth Remembering, the Poetry of Our Heritage, and some of the stories. And it's quite a thick book. You can check it out in the Hainer Public Library. It's Erwin, E-R-W-I-N Thompson. Yeah, it's one of my favorite poems.
Yeah.
Yes.
That last poem talks about the school being gone.
Yes.
What do you know about the schooling of these generations? Where did they go? Kind of experience.
I mean, where did they go? Or I'm not quite sure what you're
What
asking.
schools in one-room schoolhouse did anything go to school here in Elsah?
This is one of those times I wish my dad was like, Daddy, help the girl out. Right now I'm forgetting the name of the school. He said walk 2 miles each way. So it was the Piasaw Bridge. So going from Evergreen Heights across the Piasaw Bridge. So it was a one-room schoolhouse, of course. That's all I can say. I'm sorry, I can't say more.
Would that have been up around Belfries or something?
We can surmise. Yes, did you have a question or who else? Yes.
I just had a comment. I used to come to the dances here.
Yes.
And
And you were a big part of them.
yeah,
The contra dances. Yes.
we inherited it from a family that left town.
Yes.
And it landed in our lap and we put it together. But one night we had a group of old, I don't want to say old, they were local guys and they played with your dad.
Yes.
And they, I don't know if you know this, but I guess it was like the week that he passed away. And they honored him and they're like, oh, this song is for Mr. Thompson, and
Yes.
they played it, and it was something that he had written, and I don't know the details of it.
Well,
But the men
yes.
just adored him.
yes, those that might have been the Buchanan brothers. What I do know is that after Daddy passed, the Buchanan brothers gave a program at the Hainer Library. And the tune that you're talking about is John Short's tune. That's the one I fluffed up. Sorry, Ned. So this John Schwartz tune, if anyone knows it, if anyone plays it, like in the Midwest or wherever in the fiddling community, it's because it can be traced back to my father. Well, I learned it from so-and-so, so-and-so. Oh yeah, and I learned it from Erwin. And of course, originally it was John Short, but so I wrote an article you might really be interested in reading. It's in the Old Time Herald, it's online, and it's called The Music Breathed In. Music Breathed In. And so I think if you look that up, or Old Time Herald, Janet Riehl, it would come up. It's a really beautiful article. And so it starts with talking about the John Schwartz tune.
Well, of course, I went to school 1st through 6th grade at Melville,
Yes,
and Julie and I were in the same grade.
yes,
And your father and mother would come up there, and in the lower part, while we'd square dance and all that. I mean, we were like, I was like 9 or 10. That'd be around 51, 52.
yeah.
somewhere.
I also went to Clifton Hill, but by that time they were only doing K through 3. Someone else, yes.
2 questions. Didn't your father have quite an extensive military career
Yes, he did.
in World War II? And also, wasn't he kicked by a horse severely?
Yes, he was.
I remember those things. He was my scout leader. I remember
Yes.
being with him so often. He was a wonderful man. I thought-
And Jim, I'm so happy you're here tonight.
Pardon?
I'm so happy you're here tonight. So his military career, that's also something he's written about. And in novels, these books I mentioned are novels. He's also written a lot of what I call photo documentation books, where there's the photos, some of which the kind that we'll show later on. And then on the other side, it'll say exactly what the photos are. And so you know how it's terrible, like you look at these old photos and you go, well, who was that? And so no, it's all there. And so those also are at the genealogy library. Like there's the making of the river road there. There's the Bluff Line Railroad. There's the one about my great aunt Mim, a woman before her time. And so yeah, you could go down there and have a good time. Just go talk to the librarian and tell them what you want. I found out that they're not all in one place. I imagine it was in one place. So there's a wonderful book. There's several, but one's called The Second Mile. And that is a novel based on his military career. He had a Purple Heart, he had a Bronze Star, and he had a Silver Star for gallantry above the call of duty. And there's some very moving stories about that, and poems also that he's read. I have a blog called Riehl Life, Village Wisdom for the 21st Century, with the mission to create connections through the arts and across cultures. And my father was a very prolific contributor to my blog. So if you would go to my blog and just look up Erwin A. Thompson or Erwin Thompson, again with an E, you would find this story, for instance, of what happened. It's very, very moving story of what happened when they went out on patrol. Yeah. And the horse kick, oh gosh, the horse kick, we had a horse named Tony, I think it must have been. And yeah, so the horse kicked him, terrible. And then of course he went to the hospital and had to have surgery. Now, when he was in the Army, he had really bad shrapnel wounds and bad damage to his abdomen. So after this surgery, he would say, you know, I don't know what he did. Nothing's in the same place it was, but this problem I had before is fixed.
Rearranged it.
And cut some parts out. So the surgeon, Dr. Vi, I don't know if any of you knew him, but after the surgery, he came to look at, you know, the result, how my father was doing. And he said, Erwin, I've done everything that man can do. Now it's up to God. And so, yes, he obviously pulled through. Okay, now the other funny thing about that was that my brother Gary had a 4-H project, interview in 4-H. Okay, yeah. So he had a 4-H project raising a pig. And our grandfather Johnston was a pig farmer. Okay, so he had given Gary this pig to raise. All right. So it was at the point where it needed to be butchered. Well, Daddy wasn't there. Well, okay, we're Thompsons. We can do it. So I don't know, maybe I'm 10, 12. Gary's, you know, 14 or whatever. Julia's maybe 18. I don't know, or someplace in there. So it's cold, it's icy. There's a little hill, has ice on it. We've got our ice creepers on. Anyway, we go through the steps that you need to do to butcher a pig. And then each time that we were, okay, we call it, Daddy, we did that one. What do we need to do next? And we do that one. So, and so he coached it step by step from the hospital to butcher this pig from start to finish. And we're just kids. But that's very much the ethos of my family. This is too crazy. And then, of course, once we had the meat inside, my mother very ably knew how to process it all. Something else?
Yeah.
Yes.
There are more people listening and watching
Yes.
tonight online
Yes.
than are here.
Yes.
That's one thing I want to say.
Yes.
Second was, how many people here are related to you tonight?
There is no one here related to me in the room. There are people that I do know. There are other people who know me. You know how that goes. And there are people here that know or knew my brother or my sister. So
One of your relatives wrote on the chat, beautiful job, Auntie. Love you, fun memories flowing in. Thank you for inviting me. You did great. Grandpa always did love.
is that Sarah?
Yes.
Yes, that would be Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. Yes.
Where is Melville Cemetery?
Aha. So if you know where Clifton Hill is, yes, and you know where the Baptist church is, kind of at the top. And so if you then kind of at the top of Clifton Hill, if you turn right, then the first to the left, there's a brick building, kind of a blonde brick building there. That was the school, Clifton Hill School. And then there's a cemetery there.
Between the Baptist church and it, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see that there's a depression there where the church was.
Huh.
And then our family gravesite is there's a field, and I don't know who farms that now, but it was the Volmers, and they had donated that. And so our plot is at the very far end. The Volmers are here, the Riehls are here. Yeah. And also, were you to go there, you would not only see my father's headstone, but you would see the military plaque that honors all of his service.
On that same note, if you go to the Baptist church and look on the podium out front, you'll see Melville Congregational Church for the Baptists. It's in the box there. So that's where the
Okay,
church moved to, and then they changed the Baptist.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I went there as a child. It was an
Ah, yes.
old church.
Yes, as did I.
Yeah.
As did I. Anything else?
What are ice creepers? You said.
Oh, ice creepers. Oh, yeah. Well, they still have them, but now they're kind of coiled. At that time, they were spikes. So you put them over your shoe.
There's spikes, you won't fall. Right?
And now, yes, that's right. And now they are wire coils. It's the same idea. But
that did not save my sister. We had, she was carrying a 16-quart kettle from the kitchen to the barn of boiling water.
Oh, my gosh.
And as I said, the little hill was icy, and
Oh, my
So-
goodness.
part of our, anything that went wrong. Anything went wrong, my father would say two things. He would say, well, Bill's character. Or he would say, part of your education. So yes, butchering on our own was part of our education. Yes.
Your great grandfather, what was his family's background? Do you know?
German.
Were they also involved in plants and horticulture?
His father, Daniel, had a nursery in St. Louis.
In St. Louis.
Yes. And the family came from Alsace-Lorraine, which is that little strip of land that kept getting tossed back and forth between Germany and
My
France.
husband.
Your family came from that too.
Talk about that. Just experiences, you talked about the two expressions Dad had.
Yes,
Well, in Scouts, there was one that he had all the time. He would take a shingle to you, okay?
yes.
He let you know, he'd take a shingle. I don't remember it ever hitting the child, but we were sure he was gonna do that, okay?
Right.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, did you ever mow that hillside going up to your property? That was so scary to me to see people on a tractor out there mowing the hillside so steep.
Well, I have to say that my brother does mow it. He
Yeah.
does. And in terms of the shingle, so I lived 5 years in Africa, and I lived in Botswana and Ghana. And in Botswana, if a mother, the young child doing something you're not supposed to, it's kind of like, take close up. Only they do it in such a way that it snaps. I can't do it, but kick close up. And they're not going to, but it's like the look. So that's the thing. Yes.
I have another message from someone, Bonnie Hildeland, who says, I knew Erwin, rented a house from him many years ago and enjoyed having him and your sister Janet over shortly after their return from their African community service. My father also worked with him at Union Electric.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. My father was steward for the union for a very long time, and there's wonderful stories about that. And there's novels about that too. And with any luck, you can also find those in Hainer too. I love his stories about Union Electric. And in fact, during the 1993 flood in Grafton, of course, it was high. And there's a picture of my dad in a wetsuit and a hard hat, like taking care of the gas services. Yeah, that man. Okay. We good? Anything on the chat?
Let's see.
What about the images?
We
You
will
want
do
me
the
to show the
images.
images now?
Yes, let's do the images. And
Patricia Smith Thurman said, great job, Janet. I hope you write a book about your story as well.
thank you, Pat. Yeah, she's a wonderful friend in St. Louis. Yeah. So yes, let's have the slides. And I wasn't really going to talk about that, but since we're doing it at the end, we could. So, something else, Jeff, or you're dialing up the slides?
think we should stretch our legs.
Oh, absolutely.
And there
And
are
then-
some,
Okay, but I think he's, just a second, I think he's bringing, are they
oh,
just
you're gonna
coming?
are you gonna narrate?
I wasn't, but now that it's working out this way, there's not that many. Okay, so here we have a high-class summer resort in the bluffs. And that's the one I mentioned in my talk, his best crop, right? That they were, this is like my yard. And the other one that we saw briefly is what was the Croquet Lawn. So the Sunday dinners, the anti-Sunday dinners were very famous. And so people would come from all around, from St. Louis and such. It would be, I guess, like, salon sounds a little too highfalutin, but people coming and gathering and talking. And then afterwards, they would go out and play croquet. So, and if you go down to the Paisley launching ramp, you'll see some of these pictures too.
I did have a question about,
Yes.
did they start the Clifton Terrace Hotel? Was it a Riehl?
No, that was, I know the story of that, but it's another story. Yes,
Sure.
thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's right.
Yes. And there's a wonderful, in a little pocket park at the bottom of Clifton Terrace, there's some good documentation about that. And there's the wine cellar is there. And also, of course, if you went down to the genealogy library, I'm sure there would be things on the stairs. Well, so how are we doing on the slides? Should we take a break?
Oh, we have the projector. It suddenly went off.
It is closed down.
Technology, what are you gonna do with it? I think we have to spank it. I think if we spank it. So.
All of a
Jeff, what do you
sudden, when we
think?
started using it, I'll get it back at some.
So we could, yeah,
I have a note here.
yeah.
The newspaper in 1889. A Riehl. Philip on $2,500.
I don't think so. Philip? I don't think so. That doesn't sound right. No, that does none of that sounds right. I have no idea. No, I have no idea. We'd have to run that down. Never heard that. Doesn't sound right at all.
There's in the museum here, there's a big book. Of newspaper clippings having to do with Elsah. Let me read it.
I have no idea. Again, it just so does not sound right in any way at all. Oh, well, while we're doing this and deciding whether we're going to break and nibble and socialize, but I want to acknowledge, I mean, of course, the point is, as George was saying before, of course, this is my family story, all right. But the point is that each of you have your own stories. And then you were telling me that it's your father. Go ahead and tell.
Well, so my mom, Jerry, but Charles Hunter was part of getting Elsah declared as a historic district. And so when Farley was kind of falling over and needed bracing, that helped him get grant money. And do some of the muscle work too. In the flood of 72 and then 93. So part of the reason the building survived. And then when they peeled off, didn't they peel off a layer and discover this paint? Yeah. So this is all covered up. And this is a little bit of all this beautiful paint was behind me.
So I think we're at a technological standstill or impasse, let's say impasse. So on the one hand, it's like gladiators, right? There's Jeff here on the one hand, like, and on the other hand, there's technology going, yeah, you can't catch me. So while we're at this technological impasse, then let's, as George suggested, let's take a break. There is refreshments here and a little bathroom there. And most importantly, make sure to take essentially your party favor. And again, this is the audiobook.
Very generous.
So it's what I want you to know about, so what is it? In 2004, some of you knew my older sister, Julia. She was a world-class physicist, and she died in a nasty car wreck here, August 16, 2004. And so following that, I had been living in Northern California in Lake County. So I started the process of coming back home. And at that time, my mother was at home. My father was one of her primary caregivers, and he and I partnered with taking care of her. And I was during the day tied to the table leg, as my brother says, and he was at night, which is killer. It's killer to be night nurse. I know that some of you are familiar with this. She suffered from dementia as a result of a hemorrhagic stroke, and so it was a time of great learning and challenge. And my relationship with my father, in a very beautiful way, transformed. So we had an adult relationship, as I'm sure many of you have also experienced how that is. I would be like here for 6 weeks and then back to Northern California for 3, etc. So the book, Sidelines of Poet's Diary, also at Hainer, is 90 story poems and 25 archival photos that tells the story of the year after my sister's death, when I am coming back to the place. And there's a section for my sister, my mother, my father, the home place here in Lake County where I was. So it's that year. It ends with a poem called Anniversary, which was August 16th. So I would very much like for you to take my home, if you would. So thank you very much. Where there's light, there's hope.
Janet has nicely donated these for your taking. And she's written on here, please take a copy as her gift. And then she says, if you have some folding money, I have no idea what that is. We'll take Bitcoin. But anything you put in the jar, it will be a donation to Historic Elsah Foundation. That's a very, very kind gesture.
Okay, so here we are. Excellent.
Sorry.
Okay. Working on it. So I had talked about the chestnuts, and so these are, okay, right, let's just stop right here a minute. So this tells, I guess it's set up to be time. All right. This is the Piasa Creek in a little boat. Okay, here we are. Sorry, this is such a gas. So there's Riehl. That was Riehl. Here's the picture, family picture of the Riehls. This is my father's mother to be. This is the view downriver from Riehls. Here's the high-class summer resort. This is the view, also downriver from Riehls. And here's the Croquet Lawn I told you about. And here's the Riehl with the chestnut tree. And he, as I said, he developed many new varieties. Here's my great aunt Mim,
Amelia or Mim that I was talking about. And she was in front of the chestnut trees. Here we've got Em and maybe Judy burying the chestnuts, which is very, very hard, difficult work. Here we have the results of that with the chestnuts in the baskets. And again, this really is like a wonderful diagram of the parent stock and so forth. And here we have Hyacinth Creek with one of my aunties in the boat. And here's Gabriel. This is looking towards Scotch Louis Island. And here's Daddy in his rompers and short pants. And then I think that was great grandpa and Em. And here's the bridge.
Oh, that's cool.
Here's the bridge that we were talking about. And this would be what was then at the foot of our land. And this was the steamboat, the legendary steamboat I talked about. And here's Riehl Station. And if you look over there, you can see the house. And then here's the Bluff Line Railroad.
The dinky ran on that too, didn't it?
I'm not sure the sequence, but yes, it did. And here's Daddy in his short pants again. Now this is Mr. Henny. This is his pet chicken. So there's a poem about that in my book. And then yes, we have the wagon. So anyway, that's a very quick little trip.
Jen, did any of the chestnuts survive?
There are some tucked away here and there, but tucked. Tucked away. Yeah. So, okay, we're not able to. We don't have the technology whipped into shape yet. So I think at this point, yes. Let's adjourn and thank you very much once again. And all right, away we go. And to friends far and near, thanks for coming. Yeah.
You can leave it going.
Yeah, just keep them going, I think.
Thank you.
No. But yesterday, though.
Thank you so much.
Not so much tomorrow.
I don't ride the red ones, I have to.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Pleasure. It was very nice when I was giving the talk. I know, but you know, when you're giving a talk, you kind of like want to make sure you keep your engaged. Pass it out. Thanks.
What's the list of those?
No, no, it's not. So as I was saying, okay, that's fine, which year? Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. So here's the deal. At 9 months,
I don't know, following this lady, she doesn't know where she's going.
came down.
I didn't set the time, someone else set the time. In Zoom, I, you know, stuff.
Still.
27.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yes. So, okay, there's the.
There's still 7 on.
There's the. Anna Reel's mother was one of.
Bill Rent and Janet Redmond.
Anna Reel is my grandmother.
Someone named Gary Thompson about it.
And so, yeah, no, it's a wonderful. So he was born in Russia. He had, his mother was doing poorly. She had other children. Doctors said he was going to die. Send him down to his sister and let him die in peace. And we knew time to recover and so that it would say, like, it's not what I didn't die. I didn't die because I had aunts and grandmothers. I needed something. So as it happened, he was raised by
Yes.
his family. And still saw his family was great. It was yes. Oh, yes. He was really a historian. Yeah. I'm glad. I'm glad.
But